for a long time, and we were. It was like a half hour of hell, basically. It was very violent. But let me take this question right here.
When you teleported, you were one of 140 kids?
The program involved 140 kids, and then we were just in the manner of what Project Talent was doing in other federal projects. As individuals, we were jumping through different sets of hoops, so I don't know if all 140 actually teleported.
Did you have contact with them, or did you?
I was the captain of one of the regiments. Each of these 14 divisions of 10 kids had colors, so I was captain of blue team, which simply meant that I had specialized training about what to do, basically to pull rank if there was a mishap, like there was when we got to Santa Fe, but it wasn't 1971, it was 1991. So I knew who the kids were, I mean, at least 7 or 8 of them, and I found them, and the problem was that I uncovered evidence of their brainwashing simply by interviewing them. But let me just cite one example. I got Sharon to remember that we were taken up to ITT Defense Communications for the chronovisor probe to 2013 in early November of 1971, and the discrepant element of that was that a teacher from our school who'd been fired for his performance the previous year was one of the drivers in the car caravan that took us up to ITT Defense. I got her to remember that, and also to begin to discuss the fact that we were in some kind of strange technical activity up there. But the next Saturday when I interviewed her again, she not only forgot what she had said, she forgot that we had had the discussion. So in the book I'm going to show who I found, what they confirmed, and how I proved that they were still victims of the brainwashing that I had overcome. But they did confirm important elements involving quantum access in the learning lab. The Montauk chair, the spinning to induce out-of-body experiences, the remote viewing exercises with U.S. Navy officers sometimes coming to the lab. So they provided a lot of corroboration, but I couldn't get them over the hurdle of what happened off campus, which meant then I had to in turn reality test what I remembered that had happened off campus. And I got to the point where I not only confirmed by going to Santa Fe, but I had one of the leading scholars of the U.S. intelligence community, Dr. Jean Maria Arrigo, literally say to me, somewhat exasperated, Andy, stop asking all these, seventh degree of reality kind of doubts about what you happened. Just get with the program, man. You have uncovered what happened to you. You were in all that weird quantum exploration stuff in the early 70s. So I explored all other possibilities, mind control, delusion, fantasy, mistake, implantation of false memories during alien abduction. I went through all those, and I ultimately found physical evidence of my presence in New Mexico. I developed whistleblower testimony from people who were in the project, like Dr. Harold Agnew, Dr. Stephen J. Lukasik of DARPA, or people who heard about what was going on in the project, like Cliff Harris, the climatologist, when he was working with Dr. Ivan Browning, when Browning was Director of Science and Technology for CIA. So I'm going to just show through, the legal technique called inundation. I'm going to basically give an inundation of evidence in the book to prove that it was a real project.
That you were, because in the brainwashing, the color to achieve was the gold, right?
I don't know. We did have some education around the idea of feeling special or not putting any limits on what we could achieve. But I think the blue color was just random because it was actually just colors that were assigned to the 14 teams. Actually, David, I see other hands here. We'll come back to you right here.
Wouldn't this be considered national security? And why are they trying to shut you up?
That's my question.
I've just decided to run the gauntlet of risk because I don't want to not fulfill my destiny by being afraid of being killed. But they did make an attempt to shut me up. I had a meeting in the abandoned parking lot of the Wolf Creek Pass Ski Lodge in southwest Colorado with somebody who represented himself as working for the executive office of the president. That had been set up, those meetings in New Mexico and Colorado in June of 2003, which included a very nice meeting that I had with Governor Bill Richardson when he was attending the antique car show up in Chama, New Mexico on that day. Resulted in me being informed a lot about the fact that I was on the right track and that, I was also involved in something very basically sensitive from a national security perspective, because it was at that meeting with this gentleman who it was an arranged meeting through an historian from Texas who had ties to the CIA and the ONI. So I was literally being told, okay, now go over here and this person will tell you something. Okay, this person was working as an intermediate between me and the intelligence committee, between me and the government. During the last meeting at the ski lodge, he basically said that if I didn't stop researching, talking about, or writing about my project experiences, they quote unquote couldn't guarantee my survival. So that was either a veiled threat or it was them helping me by saying, if you don't shut up about the Pegasus generation of technologies, somebody else is going to kill you from another faction or something.
You mentioned that on the George Noy program, that Pegasus and Stargate was kind of brought up and brought as a television program. Was that in effort to discount the reality?
Yeah, I was discussing the fact that science fiction was invented as a literary genre to put information from classified projects like this in the public domain and confuse the public about the names of the technologies, how they worked, to rebut the claims of individuals like me who would talk about classified technologies. My point there was that the first episode of Stargate Atlantis was Project Pegasus, which was literally the name of the real project. And I know that because when they told us what the project descriptor was, they had a drawing of Pegasus on the chalkboard. It was a beautiful drawing of using pastel chalk. And also, they were using the phrase Stargate. The Stargate was the device that they set up at the Surrealist Cultural Center gymnasium that we used to access the year 2045, to gather data there and bring it back to the present.
Please tell us what you gathered anytime after 2012.
Well, I was bringing up the point that we don't need to expect or anticipate catastrophe in 2012 because all of the chronovisor probes were to different timelines. That, in fact, was detected by the project when I was on it. And so my point is that if we set our intention for planetary, cultural renaissance in 2012 rather than catastrophe, maybe that's the timeline that we'll get to enjoy. I was just raising the point that, however, they were able to discern a particular person's destiny, for example, Barack Obama's, let's say, as indicated by that experience. And I believe that was by sending people via teleportation. If you can kind of conceive of it like this, when you jump through the teleporter, it's like jumping between rooms in the same building, same timeline. But the chronovisors involved an energy field that they were setting up as a hologram that was having a lensing effect where other timelines were being bent into the laboratory. So the chronovisor was inherently unreliable for providing actionable intelligence. But I do note that by the time, certainly I had my conversations with my father during the latter part of his life in the late 1980s, that they could discern discrete data points that would happen to a particular person. Like when I asked my dad, such as becoming president, right? But when I asked my dad, well, what can you tell me about my future? He said, well, you go to Cambridge. And I said, what do you mean, Harvard and Cambridge, Mass? And he said, no, Cambridge, UK, Cambridge University in the United Kingdom. And I said, I do? And he goes, yeah. And then he said, because he had shared information from the future with me, he said, so if you're invited to go there, go. Because they were always trying to give a double positive when they revealed the future to you, because they didn't want to dissuade you from pursuing a destiny by revealing it to you before it occurred. So that became part of my actual life experience. In other words, that's on my resume now because I was invited to go and went there. So I'm saying that certainly by the late 80s, they could predict discrete destinies. And that means that they have a control over society that has not been contemplated, which was really why I was talking about the presidency. I think they may have done the right thing by informing future presidents of their destinies. If Harry Truman said when Franklin Roosevelt died, I felt like the whole world had been put on my shoulders and my feet were sinking into the ground. I mean, it must be a god-awful thing to realize that you're going to be president of the United States when you wake up, on the morning of your inaugural ceremony. So I think it was probably the right thing that they said, well, we don't want to change the future, but we do want to optimize it by revealing certain information to certain people who are going to be implicated in particular destinies that have a particular consequentiality to them. And so that's why I was talking about that.
You saw 2013 on George Noy show. You saw 2013. Why should DC be on the water?
We were in specialized suits, and they had us moving for about a half hour to a location where that location in time space was forming in the future. And it was almost like going there physically. Clearly we were in a hologram and had specialized equipment on. It was almost like sort of flying there. And they had trained us that when you felt 3 pulses, you're maybe at the end of that transit, and you should quickly look to the left or right to see what was there. And it was the U.S. Supreme Court building underwater. I mean, it was like diving on a marine ruin.
Washington D.C.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
And they confirmed that later, that it was that building.
2013, was it?
They confirmed the date and the building. Not when we were being interviewed by the officer from, from the lieutenant commander from the Office of Naval Intelligence, but the next week in the learning lab, we said, what was that building and what year was it? And they kind of sheepishly admitted
It's
that.
very important for our audience and the tape. From 0 to 100%, what's the percentage you would say that this event, this time travel you did, will signify the actual event?
I wouldn't put it in ratios because we're living in a cosmic, quantum hologram that it has virtually an infinite set of adjacent timelines that are very close and internested. For example, if you move into another timeline, you often don't detect it because you're now just wherever you are, right? So I think the chances are 0 or 1. I would look at it more in a binary way. Either those of us in this room right now are going to live a 2013 that's very wet, or we're not. So I think that you should look at it as being in the timeline where that either occurs or doesn't occur, because in fact, the probability can't even be calculated because there's an infinite set of timelines where it either does or doesn't happen.
What you say is so many different Earths, planets, and so many different people in different timelines at the same time exist.
Yes, and we have evidence of people stepping out of their timeline. There was that case in New York City where somebody stepped in front of a cab and was killed, and he had clothing, identity, and everything else from like the 1940s. He just simply stepped out on a curb in 1943 and got hit by a car in 1983. We have those cases. And those X-Files have been studied, and they are people who literally step into an adjacent timeline just doing some kind of ordinary type of activity. Steve?
What is the current status?
Of what? Courtney Hunt. Courtney Hunt had a stroke in 2001 in which he lost the ability to speak, and he's now deceased. But I want to get a picture of him and interview his colleagues. The person who confirmed that he wasn't just somebody snowing me, but in fact was, in other words, if he was part of some cult or mind control group or something, everything that happened with Hunt could have been propagated by, let's say, virtual technology or something, like the trip to El Segundo and going to Mars and everything. But the person who confirmed his status as a career CIA was Captain Ernest Garcia, who even remembered me and some of the project principals from Pegasus. He remembered my dad's friend Connie Chavez from Albuquerque. So we were able to, in my investigation, I was able to verify that Courtney Hunt was career CIA, as he said he was.
Therefore, what is the status of Captain Garcia?
Captain Ernest Garcia is alive, living in Albuquerque. He did an oral history about some of his more conventional experiences working for the military and the intel community in an oral history that Jean Marie Arrigo did for UC Berkeley. His fingerprints are over many projects. He was not only on Pegasus, but he was a guard on the Dead Sea Scroll expedition of the Israeli archaeologist Yigal Yadin. He was the whistleblower on the use of the Yanomamo Indians in Central America in U.S. biowarfare testing. So Garcia is somebody with some provenance. He was giving me a lot of information, then he got scared. And that's kind of how these kind of investigations go. Somebody will do 2 or 3 phone calls, maybe meet you at a restaurant at some point, and then they get afraid of being killed and they clam up. So I lost Garcia as a source, but I have a substantial amount of information that I was able to verify with him. And his status as somebody who was in a lot of these classified defense projects has been basically established in terms of university history. In other words, the conventional history community knows who Garcia is, and people have done oral histories with him and so forth. Right here?
Who invented or created the technology, or where did it come from?
The teleporter, as my dad said when we were talking one day at lunch in Albuquerque after we had teleported there, he said, most of what we're doing in the project comes from the works of Nikola Tesla. The device was in the papers of Tesla that were seized by the War Department and forwarded to the Los Alamos physicists when they were gathering to build the atomic bomb. So the true history of U.S. time travel is sort of as this secret sidebar to the Manhattan Project. Some of the same people were involved, like Harold Agnew, like his mentor at the University of Chicago, Enrico Fermi. The chronovisor technology was the result of an accidental discovery by 2 Vatican musicologists named Ernetti and Gemelli. who were studying Gregorian chants in the 1940s and were developing a specialized microphone to split the voices in the Gregorian chants when something Gemelli's father had said to him in childhood came through the microphone. And then they partnered with Enrico Fermi again. There's the principal figure in all this. We're going to have to do more investigation on Enrico Fermi. And they modeled it into a hologram of a past or future event